A man who builds something real with his hands, long enough learns one thing that nobody teaches you in school. The loudest thing in the room is usually the thing nobody's saying out loud yet. I built Merit Restoration Group from a single pickup truck and a used ladder I bought for $80 at an estate sale in Grovetown, 31 years ago. Now I've got 4 locations across Georgia, 62 people on payroll, and a fleet of trucks with my name stenciled on the door pull panels in navy and gold. I'm not telling you that to brag. I'm telling you because it matters to what happened on Christmas Day. Because the kind of man who builds something like that from nothing is also the kind of man who can spot the difference between an opportunity and a trap before his second cup of coffee. My daughter Sloane never quite believed that about me. Christmas morning, Evans, Georgia, the kind of December day we get down here that looks like winter from inside but feels like October the 2nd you step out onto the back porch. 53 degrees, Carolina blue sky, and Joyce's rosemary chicken smell already working through every room of the house by the time I made it downstairs at 7. She'd been up since 5:30. That woman has never once let a holiday go by without cooking. Like we were feeding a church potluck instead of just 4 people. I poured my coffee and stood in the backyard for a while. The maple by the fence line had dropped its last leaves sometime in November, and I kept meaning to mulch them before the ground hardened and hadn't gotten to it. Some stretches of the year the business eats every hour before you even notice it happening. 31 years and it still does that. Joyce came out around 8 in her robe, tucked herself under my arm without saying anything, and we just stood there the way you can only stand with someone after 3 decades of marriage. You run out of things that need filling the silence. Turns out that's the best part. "They coming at noon?" she asked eventually. That's what she said. Joyce pulled her robe tighter. She knew what I meant by that. Not the time, just the uncertainty around it. Sloane had been running 10 to 20 minutes behind whatever time she agreed to since she was about 16 years old. Joyce thought it was charming. I thought it was a habit that was going to cost her someday. We were both probably right. Rafe was another story. 10 months they'd been together. He was 29, worked in what he described as private investment consulting, which in my experience is the kind of job title a person invents when what they actually do is harder to explain out loud than it should be. He dressed well and he was good looking in the easy, low-maintenance way certain men are before life's had a chance to give them any real weather. He talked like he'd taken a course in how to put people at ease and passed it comfortably but not brilliantly. The thing I kept noticing about Rafe was that he never once asked me a question about the business. Not how I'd built it, not how I'd survived the 2008 slowdown. Not what it actually cost to go from 1 truck to 4 locations. He'd shake my hand at the door, say something warm about the house, and then turn the full wattage of his charm directly at Joyce for the rest of the evening while I watched from the end of my own couch. It's a tell. Most people don't recognize it as one. A man who's genuinely interested in the ground he's standing on will eventually look at the foundation. A man working an angle keeps his eyes at eye level. They showed up at 12:22. Sloane first, through the side door the way she always has, dropping her coat on the hook without looking, calling to her mother before she even had her shoes off. She looked happy. The kind of happy that's real, but also performing just a little. The way it is when you bring someone home for the holidays and you need everyone in the room to agree the choice you've made is a good one. Rafe came in behind her with a bottle of wine in the $40 to $60 range. I know the price point because I've bought that bottle for client dinners. It reads as effort without being extravagant. A considered number. He handed it to Joyce with both hands and she lit up, and I shook his hand and said, "Good to see you," and meant roughly half of it. We ate at 1. Joyce's chicken, brown butter sweet potatoes, green beans from her mother's recipe out of Macon. Real food, the kind of meal that deserves quiet appreciation and instead got cheerful noise, which is also fine. Sloane talked about the architecture firm downtown. 3 years in now, junior associate, residential drafting mostly, and she was genuinely talented at it. In the way she'd always been talented at anything spatial or visual. She got that from my mother, not from me. I can frame a roof in my sleep, but I cannot draw a straight line freehand to save my life. Rafe talked in a way that had the texture of listening. That was the craft of it. After Joyce cleared the plates and brought out the pecan pie she'd made from scratch, because of course she did, Rafe leaned back in his chair and said the thing people always say right before they say the real thing. "So, there's something I've been wanting to bring up, something I'm genuinely excited about, and I think you both will be too." Joyce looked at me. I set my fork down. "The group is called Meridian Asset Group. My mentor Knox runs it. They focus on distressed property acquisitions across the Southeast, foreclosures, tax delinquent parcels, estate sales that need to move fast. The returns have been exceptional. Knox closed 4 deals this year, and his investors average 15% annual return. He slid his phone across the table toward me, a portfolio summary on the screen, numbers in clean columns, a logo that looked like it had been designed in an afternoon by someone who understood that professional looking and professional are not the same thing. Sloane's already in, he said. 40,000. Her own savings. The buy-in window closes January 15th, and if we move before then, we can lock her position and add a co-investor tier. We were thinking, if you and Joyce were open to it, that 120,000 from you would get us both into the preferred return bracket, total of 160,000, working together as a family. I looked at Sloane. She was watching me with the expression she's had since she was about 11. The one that wants approval and is already bracing for the version of me that won't give it without question. How long has your money been in? I asked her. 6 weeks. She'd sent $40,000 of her savings to an investment group 6 weeks ago and mentioned it to me for the first time at Christmas dinner. That settled somewhere quiet inside my chest, and I didn't say anything about it right away. What's the entity structure? I asked Rafe. Is Meridian registered with the SEC, or are they operating under a Regulation D exemption? His face did a thing, small, a recalibration. I'd have to ask Knox the specifics on the compliance side. What state are they domiciled in? Georgia, I think, possibly Delaware. You think? He smiled, the smile of a man who had not expected that specific angle. Look, I understand wanting the details, but Knox's track record really does speak for itself. The network he's built. I know what Knox's track record looks like, I said. The table went quiet. Joyce's hand found the edge of her placemat. I'd looked into Meridian Asset Group 11 days earlier. A friend of mine, retired attorney named Alton, had spent 2 decades handling white-collar fraud cases before he moved into private practice. We'd known each other since our kids were in Little League together. I'd sent him everything Rafe had given Sloane, the portfolio summary, the pitch language, the name, and by the next morning Alton had sent me 3 pages of notes in his careful, precise handwriting. No SEC registration, no Regulation D filing, no recorded deeds on any of the 4 properties Knox supposedly closed this calendar year. The Meridian Asset Group name appeared in a 2021 complaint filed with the South Carolina Securities Division. A man named Knox Dillard had been named in that complaint. The case settled out of court with a confidential agreement and no admission of wrongdoing. 11 days I'd had that. I hadn't said a word to Sloane because there is a version of this conversation a father can have too early and it doesn't land the way it needs to. I needed it to land. Dad, Sloane said, and something tight had already moved into her voice. Just hear him out, please. I did hear him out. Rafe kept the smile in place and explained that Knox operated privately by design, that the deals moved fast because the margin was in the speed, that the people in his network were people who understood how real wealth was built, not by waiting for bureaucratic systems to validate every move. And I sat there listening, and I thought about the $80 ladder and the single truck and the 31 years, and I thought, son, I am the system you're describing. I built it myself, with my own hands in bad weather, and more than a few mistakes I paid for out of pocket. I know exactly what it looks like when someone borrows the vocabulary of building without the structure underneath it. What I said was, Rafe, I've had some time to look into Meridian. I have serious concerns about the registration and about Knox Dillard specifically. I don't believe Sloane's money is where either of you think it is. He went very still. Then he said with real heat in it, that's a significant accusation. It's a serious concern. There's a distinction. You don't know Knox? You don't know what he's built or who he is. You're asking me to put $120,000 into something I cannot verify exists on paper? I think asking the questions is the minimum reasonable response to that. Sloane put her fork down, Dad. I'm not attacking Rafe. I am asking about the investment. No. She pushed back from the table slightly. No, you're doing what you always do. You decide something doesn't meet your standard, and then you go looking until you find the reasons. That's not research, Dad. That's control. It has always been control. Every decision I've tried to make, you've had the spreadsheet ready, the concerns, the reasons why I'm not quite ready yet, why the timing isn't right, why I should wait. Sloane? I have been living my own life for 5 years. I've been at that firm for 3 years, and they are fast-tracking me. I am 26 years old, and I am trying to build something, and you cannot. Not once, not one single time. Look at something I bring you and trust me. I do trust you. You trust your judgment? You trust your research and your 30 years of building things. You trust every instinct you have, except the one that says maybe I am capable of knowing something you don't. She was standing now, and across the table Rafe sat with his arms folded and his eyes level, and in that moment I saw the thing I hadn't quite been able to name in 10 months of watching him. He wasn't surprised. This wasn't a conversation that had gotten away from anyone. He was watching it the way you watch a door you've needed someone else to open for you. "You are the reason," she said, and her voice cracked in a way that made Joyce reach toward her instinctively. "You are the reason I have spent my entire life feeling like nothing I do is ever quite enough. Like I'm always one step behind some version of myself that you've already decided I should be. I've seen you since the moment you were born. Then show it." She sat down. The table went the kind of quiet that has weight to it, the kind you could set your hand on. I stood up slowly, laid my napkin on the table next to the half-eaten pie. Joyce's fingers touched my arm and I put my hand on hers for just a second before I moved toward the kitchen. "I hope Knox is everything Rafe says he is," I told Sloane on my way out. "I mean that genuinely. If I'm wrong, I'll be the first one to say so." I walked through the kitchen and out to the garage and sat in my truck with the engine off for a long time, listening to the neighborhood settle into that particular Christmas afternoon quiet when everyone's inside, and the whole street belongs to nobody. My phone buzzed. "Sloane. You embarrassed him? You embarrassed both of us in your own house? I can't believe you." I typed back and set the phone face down on the passenger seat. I didn't go far that afternoon, just drove out toward Jackson Lake. I own a cabin out there, built it 11 years ago on weekends and evenings, with help from 2 of my crew on a piece of land I bought during the stretch when nobody else was buying. Sloane had asked me in February if she and Rafe could use it occasionally. I said of course. Occasionally had become most weekends. I knew because I checked the utility account and the propane logs out of habit the same way I check all the company properties. I drove out there in the December dark, changed the key code on the door lock, the digital one I installed 2 summers back. The new combination was something Sloane didn't know. Then I drove home. Rafe texted me at 9:17 that night. "We have personal property inside your Jackson Lake cabin. Clothing, equipment, items we require access to. If you've locked us out of a property made available to us under verbal agreement, that could constitute unlawful withholding of access." I read it twice, then I wrote back. "The cabin is an asset of Meridian Asset Group LLC. I make it available to family members at my discretion as the company's principal. My discretion has been revised. If you have belongings inside, we can schedule a supervised retrieval at a time that works for everyone." He called Putnam County Sheriff's non-emergency line. I know because Deputy Vickers called me at 10:40 that night, friendly, a little apologetic in the way of a man who has already sorted out what kind of call this is, and told me there'd been a property access complaint. I gave him the cabin address, the LLC name, and my name on the deed. He said that wouldn't be necessary to verify further. I heard in his voice the exact patience of a man who has driven 45 minutes on Christmas night to resolve something that resolved itself the moment he pulled into the driveway. I slept poorly, not from anger. The anger had burned through somewhere on the drive out to the lake, but because I kept running the dinner back in my head. The way Rafe's face recalibrated when I said Knox's name, the way his eyes moved to Sloane just before she stood up, the timing of everything, the shape of it. People think manipulation looks like a villain working in the shadows. It doesn't. It looks like a man sitting quietly at your Christmas dinner table while your own daughter says exactly what he needed said, with exactly enough emotion that no one thinks to ask whose idea it was first. Joyce came into the study around midnight. She'd been quieter since dinner than I'd seen her in years, which with Joyce means she's finished thinking something through. "He steered her into it," she said. "It wasn't a question." "I know." She didn't realize it. No, she didn't. She sat in the chair by the window for a while without saying anything else. That's the thing about 32 years. You learn the shape of each other's silences. This one meant she was sad about something she had already made peace with. Sloane texted again on the 27th and again on the 29th. The third message was long, the kind you write at 2 in the morning when pride has finally run completely out of road. "Knox stopped answering calls 2 days ago. Rafe says it's probably still the holiday, but the group chat messages aren't delivering. Someone in the group said their wire bounced back on a follow-up transfer. Dad, I'm starting to think something is really wrong. I don't know what to do. Please just call me." I didn't call. Not yet. I knew what was wrong, had known it for 11 days. But the man who rushes in the second things start shaking doesn't give his daughter anything except the understanding that shaking leads to rescue. Some things you have to stand inside long enough to understand their full dimensions. By January 3rd, Knox Dillard had gone dark completely. The group chat had 22 people in it, and exactly 0 of them had heard from him in 4 days. A woman named Trina, who'd come into the group through a separate referral connection, posted that she'd retained an attorney. By January 5th, Rafe had confirmed there was nothing to retrieve. No fund, no properties, no Knox. Sloane's $40,000 was gone, plus the $8,200 she'd wired in December for what Rafe told her was a rush processing fee on the January closing. She showed up on a Thursday morning, didn't call ahead. I was in the driveway going over a material estimate on my tablet when she pulled up. She looked like she hadn't slept cleanly since Christmas. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "I know." She looked at the truck, at my name on the door. She'd grown up watching me load that truck at 5:30 in the morning, and she'd never once asked me to explain what any of it cost, what I'd sacrificed, what the bad years looked like from the inside. I'd always figured she'd ask when she was ready for the answer. "How long did you know?" she asked. 11 days before Christmas. She closed her eyes. "Then, why didn't you just tell me?" "I tried to tell you at Christmas dinner, before Rafe needed me to stop." She looked away from me at something in the middle distance. "Is it all of it?" I asked. "All of it." She said it so flat and empty that it landed heavier than anything dramatic could have. "And part of my emergency fund." He said the January closing needed a rush fee, almost $50,000 total. "Where is he?" She gave me a look that answered most of what I hadn't asked. Whether Rafe had known Knox was a fraud from the start or whether he'd been a victim himself, she still didn't know. She'd asked him directly, and the conversation had not gone the way she expected, and she left it at that. "Come inside," I said. "Your mother's got the coffee going." We sat at the kitchen table, the 3 of us. I let the conversation find its own pace. She cried once briefly into a paper towel, then pulled herself together with the stubbornness she's had since she was 4 years old, and fell off her bike and refused to let me see her do it. She gets that particular trait from me. Joyce has always said so, usually not as a compliment to either of us. Eventually Sloane said, "I said things to you I didn't mean." "I know." "Not all of it. Some of it I meant." Her voice was steadier now, "but not the part about you not seeing me. That part I didn't mean." "I know that too." She looked at the table for a long moment. "You were right about all of it, and you sat there at your own Christmas dinner and let me say those things to you." "I let the truth finish the job," I said. "I've found over the years it does better work than I do." She almost smiled. "Not quite." She went home that afternoon, and I sat in the study after Joyce had gone to bed and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. There's a folder in there I'd started putting together back in September. Sloane's birthday is in November, and I'd been thinking about it since late summer. Inside, a letter from my commercial real estate broker and a signed lease agreement for a 14,400 square foot creative studio space in the Depot District in Augusta, paid in full for the first 2 years. Sloane had mentioned across 4 or 5 years in that casual way, that means the opposite of casual, that what she actually wanted someday was her own residential design studio. Small, her own, built from the ground up. I'd been planning to give it to her at Thanksgiving and then held off when the lease rate dipped slightly. Then Christmas happened, and I locked it back in the drawer. I didn't take it out of the drawer that night. She wasn't ready to receive it the right way, and I wasn't ready to give it the wrong one. She started showing up differently over the following weeks. Not performing, just present. She called one Sunday afternoon and asked how I'd structure the business entity when I first incorporated it. The week after that, she asked what mistakes I'd made in the early years, the real ones, the ones that cost money. The week after that, she asked if I'd look over a basic cash flow model she'd drafted for a hypothetical small design practice. I looked it over. It needed work. I told her so specifically, not critically but precisely, and she came back the following Sunday with a revised version that was better in 3 of the 4 areas I'd flagged and asked good questions about the 4th. On a Saturday in March, she set a spiral-bound document on the kitchen table in front of me. 12 pages, tab sections, financial projections through year 3, client acquisition strategy with actual comparable data pulled from similar studios in the Augusta market. We sat at that table for nearly 3 hours. Joyce brought us sandwiches at noon and stayed out of our way, which is the thing Joyce does better than almost anyone I know when the 2 of us are finally talking the right way. The projections for year 2 were optimistic in one specific area, and I could show her why with numbers she could verify herself. She took notes. She didn't argue. She asked the right follow-up question. At the end of it, I reached into the folder I'd brought down from the study that morning and slid the lease agreement across the table. She looked at the letter from the broker, looked at the signed lease, looked up at me. You had this in September? The letter is dated September 18th. She put both hands flat on the table and stared at the document for a long time without speaking. The particular look of someone absorbing the full weight of what they almost couldn't let themselves accept from someone who had been trying all along to give it. There's one condition, I said. The business plan you just showed me is the beginning. You bring me a final version the same way you'd bring it to a bank, not as my daughter, as someone who has earned the right to be taken seriously. She nodded, her jaw was set in a way I recognized. And when you open, I said, you don't introduce yourself as my daughter. You introduce yourself as Sloane Merritt, owner. She picked up the lease folder and held it for a moment before placing it in her bag. Thank you, she said. She said it simply and professionally, and it was the most I'd ever heard in 2 words from her. I watched her walk to her car through the front window. She didn't look back at the house. I'm 58 years old. I have seen enough of the board by now to know the difference between loving someone and protecting them, and the difference between protecting someone and doing the work they need to do themselves. Those lines blur easily. They blurred for me more times than I'd like to count when she was growing up and I was too tired or too certain to see it. What I know now that I didn't at 30 is that the people who love you hardest sometimes look, from the outside, like the people who trust you least. They ask the question you don't want asked. They stay quiet when you want them to come running. They make you earn the thing they were already planning to give you, because they understand that a thing handed over before it's been earned doesn't hold the same weight in your hands. Sloane Merritt Design opened on a Tuesday morning in June, in a space with big north-facing windows and her name in simple black letters on the door. I drove by at 7 in the morning before she got there and sat in the truck for a few minutes looking at it. Some things you build with lumber and nails. Some things you build with the harder materials, patience, silence, the willingness to let someone you love hit the ground knowing they'll find their footing because you made sure the footing was there even when they couldn't see it. She called me that evening after her first day, told me about the 2 clients who'd come in, the space, what it felt like to stand inside something she'd built and know it was hers. I told her I was proud of her. She said she knew, said she'd known for a long time, but it had taken her a while to hear it right. That's the thing about building anything worth having. The foundation doesn't look like much from the outside, but it's the part that holds everything else up when the weather comes. And the weather always comes.